Now, tensions are rising in Burkina Faso following a failed coup attempt aimed at toppling the junta led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Now, the government has accused exiled officers based in Ivory Coast of playing a central role in orchestrating the coup. These exiles are said to have coordinated attacks with internal dissidents and also militant groups. A mass demonstration was planned for April 30th, which is today, to rally public support and also denounce alleged Western interference, but authorities have urged citizens to remain alert while reinforcing national security efforts. Today, I'm meant to be joined by three guests. I would actually try to connect with those that have not connected. But first of all, Roland Stockton will be joining us, Regional Director, TRAZ Intelligence and Security Solutions in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and also Chris Ottieno, Regional Security Project Director, TRAZ Intelligence and Security Solutions in Nairobi, Kenya, will also be joining us. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm told Chris has been able to join. Chris, thank you for joining.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
All right, now, Chris, based on what's been reported, intercepts of military communications and the arrest of officers, what do you make of this latest coup attempt?
What I make of it is that this is being directed or is being steered by Western powers, particularly France and the United States. And the reason for this is because Traoré, the captain, has changed power dynamics in Burkina Faso. We have seen him having expelled France. We have seen him having invited Russia to the mineral deal. And we have seen quite a number of other officers who have moved out of the country and migrated to Ivory Coast, launching this kind of coups against the president, of course supported by Western nations. We also see in the kind of rhetoric that has come from the General of Marine Corps, General Langley, with reference to disinformation campaign about what is happening in Burkina Faso. And if you ask yourself why they are interested, you can't actually place a finger on an exact point why this is happening. Every country has resources. You sell those resources, you make money. Of course, you support your entire expenses. That could also go in support of the president's security and many other infrastructure development that we have seen the captain spearhead in his country, Burkina Faso.
Okay. Now, but in your view, how credible and cohesive was this plot against Captain Traoré's government?
This is incredible. We have seen quite what we call actionable intelligence. We have seen a lot of action taken by the government. Quite a number of officers have been arrested. A number of high-ranking meeting involving high-ranking officers has been cancelled, has been postponed. We have seen a call out by the president's siders, calling up the nationals of Burkina Faso to come up today and raise up their voices in support of this government. We have seen negative rhetoric coming in from Western countries, basically telling us that whatever we are seeing with reference to the attempts on the life of the current president of Burkina Faso is real, and the information is real, and whatever intelligence he had is real, because of a number of string of actions I just mentioned that has happened in the country of Burkina Faso. And all Africa bleeds because of this, because we know the script. We know how this goes. And we are afraid for Burkina Faso, we are afraid for the president, and we are calling on, to support Burkina Faso to make sure that the president remains in power and he continues to develop that country. And what we are reading, what we are seeing is our economic boom that has come in this country, quite different from any other country in Africa.
All right, now we'll definitely be speaking more on the negative rhetoric and also the economic boom. But now, Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself came into power via a coup in September 2022, deposing General Damiba, who had earlier seized power that year as well. Burkina Faso already saw 2 coups in 2022 alone, and Traoré hinted that, money was being used to destabilize his government. Can you tell us how Traoré has been able to manage to consolidate control after overthrowing Damiba? Because we're just, taking a look at, a little bit of history before we move on.
Yes, we know the Sahel countries have quite a number of coups that have happened in various of those countries, same to what you just mentioned that happened in Burkina Faso in September, 2023. Now, what Captain Traoré has done, he has appeased to the mass of Burkina Faso. Nevertheless, we know that 40% of that country is still under jihadist control. He still has a lot of work to do. We've seen him deploy some technology in terms of military intervention, and gradually we can see him take control over the entire country with time. But we are saying where he's seated, he's done quite tremendous job in terms of diplomatic ties, in terms of shifting powers, in terms of expelling the French government, in terms of bringing other persons who are signing contracts on the basis of mutual agreement, not on the basis of coercion and threats and using money and corruption, all that line. We have seen him do this quite in a way that has not been done there before. So from where we are seated, from a global analyst perspective, we can basically say that yes, he has done a very good job in appeasing the public of Burkina Faso, and the public have bought into this, and we can see part of the response of the public on this turnout that will be there when they go out of the streets, when they go out to the street to support the government of Burkina Faso from what has just happened a week ago.
Okay. Now, the authorities also reported that, the 2025 plotters, that's the recent plotters, included both current and former soldiers collaborating with extremist elements. Chris, Burkina's security minister also accused some coup planners of plotting from Ivory Coast. Just to put context to this, why are these Burkinabe officers in exile in Abidjan? Is it possible that Côte d'Ivoire unintentionally is being a safe haven for dissidents?
Yes, we are worried with these kinds of reports that we are receiving, that Ivory Coast is supporting these coup plotters or these persons who want to destabilize Burkina Faso. And of course, if you go back into history of any other country that has had, political turmoil, military intervention or military coups, you will see that there is a foreign hand. Unfortunately, in Burkina Faso, what we are seeing is a foreign hand from within African nation, supported by Westerners. And if you go to history and bring about precedents from many other countries, for example, in Libya, for example, in any other country in Central Africa, yes, we see that these kind of plots are organized abroad and they are executed on African land. Worse is, they take advantage of the security situation in Burkina Faso, the presence of jihadists. Of course, also these jihadists will wage asymmetric wars. So they want to garner numbers, they want to gather numbers, they want to get resources, because war is about money, is about material, and is about men. So for you to have a bigger number, you'll have to exploit all resources that are available to you. Find financials, find men, and find weapons. Of course, the jihadists who are there, they have access to weapons. How do they have access to weapons? Another long story of another day. How do they have access to money? Of course, they have got finances. If you want to know where terrorism comes from, you follow the finances. And that is the source of what is being exploited by these ex-military persons who are having safe havens in countries that are neighboring Burkina Faso and other countries in Africa that are facing these kind of security problems.
All right. Now, I'm told that Roland has joined us. Thank you so much for being here, Roland. Hello, can you hear me, Roland?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay. It's nice to have you with us. So let's just, continue from where Chris has actually stopped. We're talking about the authorities reporting that the recent plotters include both current and former soldiers collaborating with elements, and they're based in, they're exiled to Abidjan, that's Ivory Coast. So what are the diplomatic ramifications if exiled officers are indeed fomenting coups from Abidjan's soil? Because some quarters have accused Ivory Coast of being complicit in the purported coup as well, especially with reports of a U.S. general's visit to Ivory Coast.
Sadly, when I've been looking at US involvement, and they have mentioned some US concerns about the movement of funds for what they say security reasons, the movement of some gold reserves. Of course, the US has their own agenda, as does China, as does Russia, as does other players outside of Africa. And of course, I heard mention of Western interference and the US response. Unfortunately for most countries, because of the richness of Africa in lots of areas, minerals and so on and so forth, the multinational elements are keen to exploit those. And when you mentioned about the Western interference and so on, this particular coup that was attempted, it must have been financed by somebody. And the obvious players, of course, from the current government's point of view, would be the West. In particular, they singled out France. It's difficult to say because it's muddy waters at the moment, and the situation with the different military factions jockeying for position. We've seen increased military presence in certain areas, cancelled army meetings. Today, for example, the government called upon mass rallies in the country to support, to show their support for the current government. There has been some intervention by traditional institutions where they're trying to act as appeasers. But the bigger thing is this shifting alliances within not only Burkina Faso, but within the Sahel region, and the alliance of the three countries where they've had the military coup. So it's difficult to say who is orchestrating what, but quite alarming where the US is taking an interest. And of course, we always have Russia and China waiting in the wings to step in to fill a vacuum. So hard to say at the moment who is pulling what strings and why.
All right, now, still on you, Roland, you did talk about how Traoré's junta expelled the French troops and also sought military support from Russia. Well, are you saying that, you know, Burkina's pivot from France to Russia affected its internal security, and somehow the shift, you know, in foreign backers have actually stirred up pro or anti-French sentiment amongst its officers?
The problem at the moment is not only African countries, but around the world, with the new administration in the USA. It's difficult to get a handle on what exactly they are after. In the past, it was sort of quite clear. You had the Western Europe, NATO, with its allies, and then you had the Russian Federation with some of its allies. You also have other players stepping in now. Iran, for example, was instrumental in some areas. North Korea, China, of course, have their own agendas. But I saw a story today where weapons shipped from Bulgaria, which were scheduled to go to the UAE, have been identified in Sudan. This weapon shipment was intercepted. So when you just look at that, Bulgaria, Eastern Europe, UAE in the Gulf, and the weapons somehow got sidelined into Sudan. So the players are there. We also have some problems when we look at sub-Saharan Africa. There are some issues with North Africa. For example, Mali and Algeria are having a bit of a spat at the moment about the Western Sahara. Morocco, for example, is making overtures to be more involved in sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, it's offered the use of its ports to some of the nations in the Sahel area, which has alienated them in a way from other West African countries who wanted to take that trade. So at this moment, it's a cocktail of different players who are trying to influence what is going on. And of course, when you have a situation like this, it fosters discontent and it leaves the door open for other actors to exploit.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of a cocktail of players, Chris, if you can hear me, originally Burkina Faso with Mali and Niger has actually broken from ECOWAS, you know, calling it under the influence of foreign powers and also denouncing its illegal sanctions. Now, do you think that distancing from ECOWAS affected Burkina's options, leaving it more isolated and vulnerable amidst the security challenges it faces?
I do believe so. Oh, sorry, Chris.
Sorry, Roland. This is for Chris. We'll come back to you, Roland. Let Chris answer first.
Roland is very psyched up to do this conversation. Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm delighted. What I can see here, all right, is a dynamic of very many activities. Yes, they left ECOWAS, and they had a very good reason why they had to leave ECOWAS, all right? What are we seeing about them having left ECOWAS? Of course, there'll be some dwindling level of support. There'll be a creation or another opportunity where they can also find themselves in another space that places them much better in terms of responding. Look at the three junta nations of Sahel. They have formed an alliance, and that, of course, is doing a lot of causing a lot of jitters, causing a lot of ripples in the African continent in terms of trading blocks. They are now pursuing a problem with Algeria. I mean, yes, Algeria, because of access to water sources for supply chains. So basically, what we are seeing, we can say yes, having left ECOWAS had some effect. At the same time, it had not quite a big number of effect, and you can see what these trading blocks and the unions that have been formed in Africa, for example, AU, has not had quite a big impact on African affairs. We still see a lot of conflicts, for example, in DRC, and we don't see a big voice of the African Union. Yes, we have a problem in the Sahel region. We don't see quite a big voice of ECOWAS. But nevertheless, there are also disadvantages. It denies you trading opportunities, and that has a lot of effect on your economy. So when you lose this kind of opportunity, when you get to this kind of arrangement where you leave a trading bloc, of course, there'll be a bit of a hammering on the economy, and that pushes the government or requires the government to go out further and look for other coalition or other trading blocs that they can use to continue bolstering the economic situation of a nation. So I would say yes and no for the reasons that I have given. Thank you very much.
All right, now let's hear from you, Roland. Same question about if you think Burkina Faso leaving ECOWAS left it more vulnerable and, isolated amidst security challenges.
I do believe so. The problem is it's this disintegration with some African countries for a variety of different reasons, and sadly there seems to be a misunderstanding that the instability in one country can be exploited, and it can quickly spread like a tsunami, you may imagine, over the borders. Because for terrorist groups of whichever persuasion, there are no borders, and the more that countries alienate themselves and become introvert, you might say, it weakens them, and the instability is an ideal platform for other groups to exploit. Not only the terrorists, of course, but other actors. They can use the leverage from the instability for their own economic goals, strategic goals. I do think that there needs to be a deeper understanding of the unity that is needed, and the isolation it is just working against, particularly in the Sahel. We've seen Niger and Mali, Burkina Faso are forming this alliance. Of course, they all went through this military coup, so they have a sort of a common understanding amongst themselves, because the leaders are all sort of military guys who think like military guys, whereas the other countries that border them, of course, they have more democratic institutions, you may say, and they may be a little bit alarmed by what could possibly spread as those countries have shown that they seem to be doing okay in some cases. It is a bit of a nightmare scenario. The sanctions will bite and the isolation will bite. Unfortunately, the ripple effect, it could go in lots of different directions, in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. Now, let's hear from Chris. Chris, I know Roland did mention something about traditional rulers earlier, but just to reiterate what he said, a report noted that after the coup attempt, crowds, including soldiers and families of missing civilians, flocked to the Mogonaba's palace. Now, I would like to know what role traditional authorities like the Mosi King, the Mogonaba, or even religious leaders play in this crisis. Is there a possibility that they can act as mediators or voice popular grievances, you know, or do you think that they are marginalized by the military regime?
When it comes to military leadership or military rulership, definitely they have a mindset of their own. They have how they think, which could be different from civilian democratic rules. In a civilian setup, you would accept, yes, religious institutions are supposed to play a good part, which could, for example, include putting the government on check, driving reconciliatory initiatives around the country, just to make sure that the country does not topple over to crisis situations where we're having a lot of conflicts here and there. But as the military government continues to be in place, we can say there'll be a clear relegation, if not a silent relegation, of this kind of institutions to the back, and the military comes to the front and they take president. And when they take president out there, their focus will be securing the borders of a nation. And we have seen what the government in Burkina Faso has done. Just a few other days, we saw them deploying robotics in defending their country. We had drones, we had a lot of parts of military hardware that were being deployed around the country just to make sure that security within the borders is quite well maintained. If you go back to September when Damiba was toppled up by the current president, the reason was he had promised to take care of insurgents, which he did not, and that drove another government led by a captain to take over. A lieutenant colonel being toppled up by a captain. Those are about two or three ranks ahead. So what was the driving force? These people in the military, where we are from, will basically drive a security kind of a thought towards our government. That's why we have seen this general from Marine Corps saying that they are using gold revenues in protecting themselves. And you can easily say from where we are seated that this kind of a general, he wants to align himself to what his government wants to hear. Just the other day, another general was sent home because of saying they would take around 3 or 2 years to wage war against another country. But the administration wanted somebody who can tell them that we can do that right now. So military mind and civilian mind when it comes to governorship or governmentship is quite different. So with this kind of a government in place, we'll definitely see religious institutions or other institutions who can play a very good part in reconciliation initiatives being relegated to the back.
All right. All right, now, Roland, Traoré also called for pro-junta rallies against Western interference. Can you tell us, how genuine is this grassroots support?
Please, sorry.
I was asking how genuine grassroots support is for Captain Traoré's administration, because he called for pro-junta rallies against Western interference. That was after the coup.
Sorry, I got you now. I do apologise. The issue is grassroots support. As Chris was saying, the military mind, you know, Chris and I both have military backgrounds, and our main focus is always security. And of course, the problem with that is it's not addressing the underlying issues that would, for example, drive people to join different terrorist organizations. And the thing is that all those issues, what do people want in life? You know, most people, they want a stable economy, they want good education for their kids, they want a safe environment, they want economic growth, hospitals, all the things that people want. If they're not being addressed because the military guys in charge are obsessed with securing the borders and strutting about in the uniform and having having parades and so on and so forth, to the exclusion of finding out what is needed for all of the country rather than a tiny part of it. It is going to drive a wedge between the governing force, the military, and the vast majority of the people who were hoping for a better life. I do sometimes think that these issues are not being addressed. The grassroots isn't being addressed. The regional stability is not being looked at. The shifting alliances now. And one of the problems, of course, is when it comes to the different ethnic makeup in the different countries, how that can be exploited. And these issues, of course, need cool heads to look at it. I do think grassroots issues are being ignored to some degree for, sadly, this obsession with the security of the borders, which of course is important, but it only goes so far within the Sahel countries, but they're not trying to bring in other players with other borders. They seem to be isolating themselves for some weird, peculiar reason, and they have a lot of issues on their borders. We've talked about the problems with Mali, we've talked about Algeria, we've talked about Morocco and the different things going on. There are lots and lots of issues where the countries in the north of Africa are aggravating the situation where African people from sub-Saharan Africa are being dumped on the Algerian border, for example, and just left there and saying, no, go back to your own countries for a variety of reasons. There seems to be a lot of animosity which is building up between the regional players for a variety of different reasons. It is really unfortunate that the issues for Burkina Faso are being overtaken by more broader regional problems. Okay.
All right, I hear you there. Now, Chris, something Roland actually said earlier was that speaking of grassroots support, he talked about the people not getting what they want, talking about stable economy, safe environment, good education, that they're not, these issues and the rest are not being addressed. Now, Traoré has also repeatedly postponed elections and in mid-2024, announced a 5-year extension of military transition, citing insecurity. What do such delays mean for the junta's legitimacy?
Like we say, that allow me to slightly differ with my fellow director at TRAZ, Roland. My friends in Burkina Faso are telling me something different. But grassroots support for this president, Captain Traoré, is growing by the day. He has approached his government different from Damiba. How? Despite expenditure on security going up, he has equally developed the domestic economy. We have seen gold extraction and mining being done locally and processed within the same country. That was different before he took over power. Friends would do that. They would take raw materials, take that to their country, process that, and bring it back to that African market in terms of finished goods. That's different. We have seen a growth in tomato farming and processing in that country. So we are seeing a lot of money going into the pockets of Burkina Faso's. But the Burkina Faso people, a lot of money going to their pocket. And this is what makes a difference in terms of supporting a current administration. With a growth in economy, with money going to the pocket of citizens, you will see gradual growth. He has also, like I've said there before, appeased to the local citizens. They have seen him perform tremendously. His metrics, his national approval ratings are much higher than any other president that was there before him. Why? Because he's handling certain aspects of the economy in a very nice way. We cannot say that right now we will achieve 100% free education in Burkina Faso. No, that will require time. That will require proper institutions to be put in place. And we are seeing this president gradually approaching this from a very systematic perspective, and we are seeing a progress towards a positive point where we shall say Burkina Faso's economy is much better than, for example, old economies like for my own country, Kenya, or other countries that are there in the ECOWAS. So grassroots support for this president is growing, and day by day he continues to project himself as the right person to have taken that leadership for the Burkina Faso nation. Other presidents in Africa are being encouraged to emulate this person and follow that direction, where we can localize and go back and look at our economy as the people who can mine our minerals, people who can process our minerals and can take that to other markets outside of African borders in the form of finished goods.
Okay.
And that is happening. So on that particular perspective, I'd like to differ with Roland.
All right. Now, let's quickly hear from Roland just before we wrap up on the regional and a global stage. What are the broader stakes for ECOWAS, the African Union, or even global powers watching Burkina Faso's next moves?
Globally, the issues as I see them, when we'll zoom in on Africa, but around the sub-Saharan Africa, of course, we have many issues. We've mentioned Morocco, and it's reaching out to the West African countries. We've mentioned the issues with Algeria and Mali. There's also the issues currently in the Levant, spreading over this jihadist problems we're having. When we look at southern Africa, there's been some incidents in Mozambique, the north of Mozambique. You may remember the Palmer refinery attacks that took place some years ago. The big problem is, of course, it comes in one simple word: Trump. With President Trump and this uncertainty in where he's going, what he's doing, the economic fallout will affect countries, and with the tariffs and the effect they will have on those countries whose economies are not very strong, this will lead to discontent, and this will turn countries away from perhaps having a neutral stance. It will turn them towards Russia, for example, who has so many problems of its own, despite its attempt to try and put on a face of normality. China, of course, China is playing a long game. The Chinese, they don't have to worry about elections, neither do the Russians to some extent, and their worldview is it's not the next election and winning the vote and having a circus and the razzmatazz that the Americans go for. They're looking 10, 20, 30, 40 years ahead. So the issues for Africa would be to tread carefully, and if you are going to side with one or the other, I would edge your bets, because it's difficult. Other problems that we see for African people is I think the African governments collectively should do more to protect.
You off, Roland. Time is not on our side, but we really appreciate you for your time and for speaking to us on this. Roland Stockton, Regional Director, TRAZ, Intelligence and Security Solutions Limited in Netherlands, and also Chris Ottieno, Regional Security Project Director, TRAZ Intelligence and Security Solutions in Nairobi, Kenya. We appreciate you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you very much. Good evening.